Well, welcome back to 12 Hats Radio. My name's Dave Monk, and today we've got Samuel Knickerbocker over from Utah on my show from Fueling Your Legacy. And welcome to the show, Sam.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate it. Super excited.
Yep. Like for all my guests, can you just give us a 3-minute elevator pitch of what your show is all about?
Absolutely. So the Fuel Your Legacy podcast show is really about bringing on highly successful entrepreneurs, business owners, CEOs, and really bringing to the listener exactly what process they went through to identify their legacy. We want to identify the habits, mindsets, and behaviors of the world class, and how can we adopt them into our own lives. I found that most people they're not taking advantage of what their dreams are or living the legacy or living the life that they care about. Generally because they either didn't know how, they were too scared, or naysayers, or they financially were not able, or they didn't think they were financially able to do it. And so I have a list of questions that I go through with every guest, hitting on the key points of why you might not be acting on your future, your dream, your potential. And hopefully, if you listen to enough of them, then somebody's going to come up and connect with you, and you're going to feel like, hey, this is my story. This is exactly what I'm going through. And they're going to tell you exactly how they overcame that limiting belief so that you can now take steps in your future. And so that's what the podcast is designed for. I love it. I love every aspect of it. My purpose is to help you build and live and create a meaningful legacy, and do that to the best of your ability. So I love doing that.
All right, awesome. And what sort of listeners do you think you're appealing to?
Great question. So the listener base of my podcast, it varies so much. But originally it started out with like single moms, divorced, 2 or 3 kids, either stay at home still, or they had already created a career anywhere from $150,000 to $300,000 a year income, but they're still not extremely satisfied with where they're at. Their fulfillment wasn't there because they didn't know exactly where they were going. And that was the main listenership. Right now, it's pretty all over. I've got people from all over the world listening to it at this point. And they're people who are striving to, it's almost like they're closeted. I mean, not to make a crass example, and I have nothing against homosexuality, but it's almost like they're closeted entrepreneurs, like a closeted sexual person, right? And they're so embarrassed. They're so scared of what somebody else might think about their dream if they were to share it. And unfortunately, a lot of times entrepreneurs are shamed just as much as somebody who's coming out about their gender attraction, whatever. And it's an issue. And so I wanted to break kind of the silence there and say, hey, what did all these people who have already spoken up, already chosen to live their legacy, what did they do and how they move past all those fears so that you can do the same? And so a lot of the people listening to my show are people seeking advice on how to do that safely without putting their family under, their kids under, living on the street, right? They want to achieve the success without all of the, like, they want all the bridges built, and we're going to have to build some of them. But if we can go on the path that somebody else has been through, then we don't have to build near as many bridges as if we just went and did it all ourselves.
And you have had any success stories with fan mail, people saying, writing a review on your, say, Apple podcast thing and saying, hey, Sam, you've done a great job in giving me inspiration. Thank you very much. Have you that sort of feedback yet?
Yeah, I have. I should do better at having that end up in the right places. Most of the time they aren't sending it to, like, I wish I knew how to get more reviews on my Apple podcast. That's something I haven't really focused on too much. I have it in my recording at the beginning and end of my show, but I haven't really focused on the reviews as much. But I have had people who have listened to it said, hey man, I listened to this episode. Yes, I'm going to start writing a book, or yes, I'm going to be moving towards this objective. This was my concern and I've moved past it. Or I had some people who have dealt with, because I have all ranges of people, right? Because it's just about legacy. It doesn't mean they're financially successful. Some people are dirt poor still, but they've overcome some crazy things, whether it's abuse or violence, could be anything, right? Depression, eating disorders, doesn't matter. So I've had people reach out to me and say, hey, this really spoke to me. And I'm really excited to have this new perspective on life, because now I don't have to worry about all the things that people were saying about me. I know that that's just how they are, but I don't have to be that way.
All right. Yeah. And what's some of the more interesting people you've interviewed over the years on your podcast?
Say again.
What are some of the more interesting characters you've interviewed on your podcast for the past few seasons?
Yeah. Oh man. I think probably my favorite / weirdest out there person. She's actually a really good friend of mine, but she's a very successful entrepreneur who went from not really having very much to understanding that you are one with the universe and the universe is one with you, and really getting in that vibe. But she explains things through fairly graphic sexual language. I mean, to put it frankly, and she explains her experience and how she experiences her relationship with the universe in a highly sexualized language. Like I'm gonna butcher this. It's not word for word, but one of the time, I don't know how clean this podcast is supposed to be, but
you can swear like a sailor on my podcast.
Probably not gonna swear, but she basically was like, she feels like she's a walking vagina, and just anything that touches her is just giving her an orgasm. Like that's how her experience of the universe is. She's that sensationalized about everything, you know. And it's just like, it's so out there, but it's just fun. It shouldn't be funny. The funny thing about it is that it's all true. It's just using a language pattern that I'm not totally used to. So that was really, really an interesting experience as far as interesting characters. And then I've had a few of my idols on, honestly. I've had a few people that I was just like, I never thought I would get them on my podcast. And then they ended up reaching out to me. One episode that hasn't quite yet aired, should be airing in June, I believe. But he is the author of a book called Willpower Doesn't Work. Benjamin Hardy.
All right.
Is his name. And it's just cool to talk to people like that, mostly because what I've noticed about podcasting in general is I have my own thoughts. You've probably seen this as well. You have your own thoughts. You don't really realize how unique your thoughts are until you start sharing them with other people. And then they're like, whoa, how do you think that way? Like, what's going on in your mind that makes that an accurate thought? You know, and then you talk to other people who think like you. And what's interesting is my idol, right? This person that I was like, I've looked up to, I love his book. And when we're having this conversation, he's sitting there thinking, man, I've never thought of it that way. Man, I'm going to start journaling about that question because that's awesome. That's an awesome question. Where'd you come up with that? And although I don't have my PhD, I didn't go through all the education that he went through. It doesn't matter. Like, we can all learn from each other. And that's what I love about podcasting. You get matched up with some highly successful people, multimillionaires, if not billionaires. And when you have a conversation, there's always something that we can all learn from each other. And you don't need to feel less than ever. And I love that about really just life, but podcasting, you get to see it in a different light.
Yeah. And it just a balance. Have you had any failures on the way? Sorry. And what were the lessons you learned from them?
Yeah, that's a great question. So with podcasting, I think this is probably with every podcaster, but if you go back and listen to like the very beginning episodes, it's like the sound quality is terrible. Not only sound quality, the editing terrible. I didn't understand how to level volume. So I've had multiple people call me and be like, this is not able to be listened to. It's so terrible. You have this music that's super loud, and then you got to turn it down to hear the voice. And then every once in a while it squeaks, you know? So those are some of the failures that I had. Every podcaster kind of has to grow through unless they just take somebody's expert advice and does it right the first time. Even then, you're probably still going to screw up just because it's life. So there's that. There's been, I think I've only recorded 2 or 3 people. You try and vet people for your podcast and make sure that they're who you're looking for. And then sometimes you get on, you have a conversation, you're just like, that actually doesn't jive with my brand. Like, there's no way I can feel good about putting that on my show. And so you just have to ditch some of the podcasts, which sucks. And I don't know that I found a good way of telling people, look, I'm not going to air this. But sometimes you have to, just because it doesn't fit. And so that's a failure, I think, because you're not creating clear expectations. There's not enough clarity about what's expected on the show. and so that can be a problem. I think those are probably some of the biggest failures. And what I did to overcome them is I've created a system of where I have to be on my podcast, I have you fill out a jot form now so that I can see what your message is and I can determine whether I want to actually have you on my show. So I've gotten a lot better at scoping people out on social media and identifying what their message is and determining if that's something that's really going to fit. I had one guy reached out to me and he's like, oh, I'm trying to get on a lot of podcasts. I was like, okay, why? He's like, well, I want to sell this water filter. I was like, okay, like I'm cool to let anybody on my show, right? I don't care if you have something to sell or not. But like, how is clean water connected to your legacy? Like are you trying to make a legacy out of this? Or are you just trying to make a buck? And he's like, oh, well, I don't know. I'll try and think of something. 2 weeks go by and he's like, okay, I'm ready for the show. I was like, okay, so how is it connected to your legacy? And he's like, no, I just want to come in and do a pitch for my product. And I was like, no, that's not really what my show's about, And so I just turned him down right there, but that happens all the time. That's going to happen in life. It's happened to me where I think I'm a good fit, but I don't quite understand the premise of somebody's show. And then they're like, no, it's not really, not trying to share that exact story. I'm like, okay, that's fine. But that's just part of the process, I think.
Yeah. And what's fueling your curiosity right now?
Right now, so I had this big awakening with the whole coronavirus thing. So I work in an industry that I was already doing probably 80% of my meetings over Zoom, So like for me, it didn't really crush my world to see in-person interaction go away. Okay. Now I love in-person interaction, but it didn't crush my world or my business to see that. But what happened shortly after coronavirus? So in Utah, they put everybody, they say, hey, you need to stay at home more, shutting things down. And then like 2 days later, we have this earthquake that for most people who's used to earthquakes, probably not that big of a deal. For Utah though, we don't really get a 5.7 earthquake ever, it just doesn't happen. And so what it brought to my mind though was, man, my business as of right now, yes, although I can do it online, I'm still restricted to making money only if I can work online, right? So what happens if all the cell towers go down? What happens if we have an earthquake and power's out, right? At that point, I'm screwed, right? I'm out of business. Yeah. And so what I've been thinking about right now is, man, I need to have more online programs. I need to be targeting like Facebook message or Facebook marketing, different countries and different areas of my own country so that I can even more so diversify my income. Because if I have online courses, online books, everything like that, then somebody in Africa could buy my course, even though America might be shut down or America might have some horrific accident where we don't have Wi-Fi or internet, I could still be getting paid from somebody in Africa.
Yeah.
And I think too often, I mean, even you and I, you're in Australia, right? I'm in Utah, and that's such a unique thing. But with my licenses and where I had built my business from, I'm kind of restricted from that aspect of my income to America. And so I've been thinking even more so about how do I get something that's a universal product anybody can buy. It's duplicatable. I don't have to be there to babysit it, but they can get it. It's useful and in their own country. So that's what I've been focusing on, honestly, for like the last 2 weeks. Just how do I create this package as fast as possible and get it online so that people can so I can diversify my income, because I don't want to end up not having income just simply because
that's right. Yeah. It's a crazy old world. I mean, it's a paradox. I mean, we're banned from traveling overseas, yet here I am speaking to a guy on the other side of the world, and it just seems like everyone's been brought close together, though we're not physically can't physically touch one another. It's just, I think this whole coronavirus thing, and I listened to a webinar a couple of weeks ago saying this is the great accelerator. And everything that was supposed to be happening in 4 or 5 years down the track has now been brought forward now. So I think you're onto something there.
Yeah. And I would say if your business, again, if your business didn't or isn't evolving through this, it's going to be obsolete. I mean, I think even I've been talking to some like real estate professionals. And although actual like home real estate, I don't think is going to go anywhere. I could see a lot of empty office buildings once they really identify how to maintain standards and how to have people working from home everywhere. Think of how much somebody's paying in having a brick and mortar building off of their
Yeah.
overhead. Just like, you know, if all these call centers could wipe that off their overhead, having a brick and mortar, and still maintain standards of excellence, I can't see people continuing to have those expenses if they don't have
Yeah.
to, which is, it's going to be a unique place. I think in America, I don't know how it is other places. In America, it's estimated 32 million people are going to lose their jobs, which is just, it's obscene numbers. I bet 2/3 of them, maybe 3/4 of them get their jobs back, but I could see a large number of them, their jobs are going to be obsolete at the end of this.
Yeah. I think the same in Australia. We're talking about 18% unemployment, which is unheard of. It's almost like the Great Depression, really.
Yeah.
We had the recession about 30 years ago, and it was about 11% unemployed, but now they're talking 18%. I also think this is a great catalyst for AI and robotics to start take in and replace all the manual labor. Because if the next pandemic we have less, we can still have restaurants that can serve with robots. We can probably save a lot more industry than we have right now. And I think this is a great catalyst for many changes. And I'm, for one, I'm looking forward to the post-corona world. Don't know about you.
Yeah, no, I am. It's going to be, I have no idea what to expect, honestly. Like when you go look at other major shifts in history around these types of things, it transforms the countries for sure, but the world, it transforms them. So it'll be interesting to see what comes out. And again, I can't stress enough that if you are there, there's an old song that I love listening to, and these are the only words that I know of in the song. It's just an instrumental song by a guy named Paul Cardell. And the words are, there's 3 types of people in this world: the ones who make things happen, people who watch things happen, and then the people who say what happened, right? And if you're not making something happen, I don't think you're going to be, I mean, there's going to be issues for you in a few months here.
Yes, right.
For sure.
Yeah, and finally, have you got any lighthearted stories we can share with the listener?
Some lighthearted stories. Give me a topic. Give me a topic of a lighthearted story.
Oh, I know, life in isolation or anything that's happened recently that, you know.
Yeah, so no, so my wife, so we have 2 little kids, 3-year-old and he's almost 3. He turns 3 in April. And then my other son's 1. And my wife has decided that since we're all quarantined, my little son is going to start, we were going to potty train my son.
Right.
And so you want a lighthearted, this is what I think is lighthearted. So I was sitting in the bathroom, going to the bathroom, and my son, he's always had a diaper on, right? As most kids would, but now we're letting him run around naked or with his underwear. You know, so a 2-year-old discovering that he has a penis is what it is. And so I'm sitting on the toilet and I hear you know, some slapping sounds, and he's 2, okay? I'm not saying he's masturbating or anything, but I was like, "Hey, Declan, what are you doing?" And he's like, just playing with my penis. I was like, okay, you know, like there's gonna be plenty of time for that when you're older, but okay. So anyways, I think it's hilarious because it's boys figuring out their body, and it's completely innocent, you know, it's completely innocent. I think it's hilarious.
Yeah, things get away when you're free, but if I do that now, I get arrested, but
yeah, as long as you're in your own home, you're probably good.
Yeah.
Well,
thanks for coming on the show, Sam, and have a listen out.
Yeah, I super appreciate it, and hopefully we'll get you on my show soon.
Yeah, looking forward to it. Thanks, mate.